Madam President and Vice Chancellor, Mr. Shore, representatives of the Board of Governors, distinguished guests, fellow colleagues, graduates, families, and friends, j'ai l'honneur de présenter le très honorable Charles Joseph Clark. I am honored to present the Right Honorable Charles Joseph Clark. Much has been said and written about Joe Clark, and it would be impossible for anyone to do justice to his lifetime of contributions in a short citation. Much is already known about the many achievements of his life, from High River, Alberta to 24 Sussex and beyond. He was Canada's youngest Prime Minister and one of Canada's most successful external affairs ministers. As Minister of Constitutional Affairs, he negotiated the Charlottetown Accord that had the support of all provinces, all territories, Aboriginal leadership, and the federal government. This was a feat as unique as the Toronto Maple Leafs winning the Stanley Cup. It may have happened before, but it will be a long time before it ever happens again. Much is also known about Joe Clark the man. He is at the core decent, a man of unshakable integrity, a man who loves Canada, all of it. A man of conviction and courage, a man who brought honor to public life and to Canada. A man who respects people, provinces, premiers, and Parliament. A man who treated the higher calling of public life as just that, a higher calling. Joe Clark's motivations and his contribution were always about the whole, about the promise of what Canada is and what it could become. He was in it for Canada, not himself. He played to our better instincts. He fought for what he believed with passion and principle. Ask those who have worked with him up close, and they will say that Joe Clark always believed that no matter how inconvenient an action might be in the short term, one always wins in the long term by doing the right thing. And therein lies the story of Joe Clark. He was a man ahead of his time. C'est un homme en avant de son temps. And he wasn't alone, given that he was married to a woman ahead of her time. Together, they helped Canada break new ground, and they didn't do it quietly. I am reminded of Sir Winston Churchill's quote, "You have enemies? Good. That means you've stood up for something in your life." Or of Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at the time of challenge and controversy." Joe Clark lost a government on the principle that the generation that accumulates a debt should be the one to pay for it. At the time, the country was not ready for that message. But since then, we live in an era where balanced budgets are expected and deficits are frowned upon, irrespective of political party. When Mr. Clark described Canada as a community of communities, people wondered what was he talking about. And yet here we are today, where not only Canada, but the entire world is nothing more than a community of communities. It was the Clark government that believed in the devolution of power and that Canada was a partnership. C'était le gouvernement Clark qui a ouvert le Parlement et la gouvernance du pays aux Canadiens. As you'll see, his High River French is better than my Calgary French. The list could go on and on, but let me conclude by highlighting perhaps one of the more significant impacts, one that's important to him as a father of a daughter, and one that's important to me as a father of 3 daughters. It often gets overshadowed today because so much progress has been made, people forget how. The issue I'm speaking of is that of the advancement of women, not just in public life, but in society as a whole. when women were left out of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Yes, when women were left out of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It was Joe Clark and Maureen McTeer who led the march on Parliament Hill to have that duly rectified in the Charter, which it ultimately was. It was Joe Clark's Progressive Conservative government that introduced the Governor General's Awards in commemoration of the Persons case in 1979 to celebrate women whose effectiveness and courage have advanced the cause of equality. It was Joe Clark's Progressive Conservative government that made it a point to attract and protect women candidates and to ensure that women had prominent, meaningful roles in the party and the government. The first woman senator from Alberta was appointed by Joe Clark, as was the first female external affairs minister. It was Prime Minister Clark's government who introduced legislation to ensure that federal government funds were only given to companies who agreed to meet employment equity standards. Le Canada et tous les Canadiens profitent aujourd'hui de la vision, du courage et des convictions de Charles Joseph Clark. Madam Vice Chancellor, in recognition of his support for parliamentary democracy, his dedication as a professor and his work on issues of global importance, I request that you confer the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa upon the Right Honourable Charles Joseph Clark, a man ahead of his time.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Faculty Senate and the Board of Governors of Carleton University, I hereby confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereto pertaining. Congratulations, Right Honourable Dr. Clark.
Thank you.
You got a little...
Madam President and Vice Chancellor, Chairman Jacques Shore, those of you who have earned degrees, as well as those of us who have accepted it, mine was certainly an easier task than yours, and congratulations to you. Goldie, I was moved by your words, except for the comparison with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I am truly honored to accept this degree, and particularly to do so in the company of Maureen McTeer, who, as well as being a full partner in my life and career, has been courageous, effective, and true in pursuing her own goals, respecting her own identity, and setting an example which changes lives. And she agreed that I could speak first today. 15 years ago, working with Richard Clippingdale and the late Arthur Kruger, Carleton and I and the University of Alberta, my alma mater, contemplated what we called, and Goldie referred to it, we called the Canadian Community Project, building on my view of Canada as a community of communities. That project was set aside when I returned to Parliament, but the importance of community is worth renewing now. My immediate predecessor as Foreign Minister was Jean Chrétien, who went on to other things. When I became Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Chrétien said, and I'm quoting him precisely, "One of the things Joe Clark and I have in common is that neither one of us knows anything about international affairs." Well, Mr. Chrétien can speak for himself, but what he might have said at the time is that we both came to Parliament as domestic politicians. What drew us was not international issues, but national, and more particularly the nature, the unity, the identity of Canada. Those issues once dominated our national discourse and debate. It was not just the Constitution. Certainly, it was not just Quebec, but the broad and basic question of how we act together as a diverse, dynamic, distinctive national community. That instinct to connect and keep a whole country is historically what led Canada to build a national railway, build national health care, a national broadcaster, inclusive national political parties. Then Canada's focus shifted. Our dominant debate lately has instead been about the economy, not the community, cutting spending, opening trade, encouraging business. No one disputes the importance of facing hard economic realities directly, least of all today. But your world, as graduates in 2010, will be shaped more by the quality of our national and international community than by the simple strength of our economy. In the Cold War era, the conflicts which threatened our survival were animated by ideology. Today, many of those conflicts are rooted in culture and in inequality. They are highly contagious. They respect no homeland security. They clearly cannot be resolved by mere military power or by the so-called magic of the market. So, where the roots of conflict are different, the remedies must be different. A critical challenge now is to bridge hostile cultures, and the indispensable attributes and the example that can be so powerful are the ability to draw differences together, to manage and respect diversity, to earn and generate trust. And those are the traditional and the genuine signature qualities of Canada, rooted not just in our history, but in our behavior, day to day, our diversity, the growing equality of rights in Canada, and our example and our success as precisely a community, our Canadian assets, which are as important to our future as our resource and our material wealth. And there is a warning. If we fail to value and invest these clear assets, our place in the world will decline. By the conventional standards of economic growth, several countries are already overtaking us. The Goldman Sachs projections of the world's largest economies by 2050 puts Canada 16th, a little smaller than Vietnam, a little larger than the Philippines, behind Turkey, behind South Korea, behind Nigeria. However, the combination of our economic capacity with our success and example as a community which respects diversity can make Canada a significant and positive influence in the world taking shape. Long before, as the prayer reminded us, long before Europeans settled here, our Aboriginal peoples were as diverse as the geographies and climates which formed them. From the nations of the plains, to the woodland, to the Innu, to the art and seamanship of the Haida, to the caucus of the Algonquin, to the Longhouse of the Iroquois and Huron. And after Europeans settled and disputed and fought the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, the side which won that battle did not treat the side which lost as a vanquished people. On the contrary, we kept the French language and the English. We kept the civil code and the common law. We kept for almost a century the seigneurial system of land distribution. Fly today over the Red River in Manitoba and see as evidence the long strips of land stretching back from the water. We deliberately respected the minority and the minority culture, and that set the pattern which made it possible for wave upon wave of different cultures from Europe, from Asia, from the Middle East, and Africa, and the Americas, and everywhere to come here and to cooperate here in relative harmony and respect. Of course, there are tensions in Canada, and prejudice, and discrimination, and bursts of violence. There is the continuing scar of the conditions of life of our Aboriginal peoples. And there are other vibrant multicultural countries in the world. But Canada may be the most successful country in the world at bridging cultural differences. Our own culture is to respect culture. Those qualities are in our history, they are in our nature, but they are not our birthright. They have always to be earned. This country was built against geography. It was built against North-South economics, against the prejudice that cultural differences should set people permanently apart. Yet now, we are wealthy, lucky, increasingly self-absorbed. Without some sense of common purpose or vocation, we could become smaller than our whole, burrowing in to our regions, or our economic sectors, or our private lives and diversions. Canada has always been an act of will. We did not come together naturally. We don't stay together easily. Confederation was an act of will. So was Medicare. So was equalization. So was the Charter of Rights. So was free trade. As graduates today, you each have your own plans and hopes and aspirations. But remember this about this country, whether you are a Canadian or an admirer of Canada, our future will reflect your will. I wish you well, I wish us well, and I am honored to be part of this community of graduates. Thank you.